and Personal Power are a book told by Özge Samancı on her most recent graphic novel, Evil Eyes See. My name is Burcu Karahan. I'm a lecturer here at Comparative Literature Department. It is such a joy to finally welcome her in person. Ayça and I had designed a course in Middle Eastern graphic novels, and Özge was our guest a couple of years ago, 3 years ago in Zoom. But it's really a pleasure to have her here today in person. Özge is an exceptional media artist and graphic novelist, but she's also an associate professor in Northwestern University's School of Communication. Her interdisciplinary practice blends interactive art, creative coding, fabrication, and emerging technologies, often engaging with deep environmental and scientific themes. Her works have been exhibited at prestigious international institutions such as SIGGRAPH Art Gallery, the File Festival, and the WRO Media Art Biennale. Özge is also the author of the acclaimed graphic memoir, Dare to Disappoint, which is a coming-of-age story about growing.
Super exciting for me to share this work. It took 5 years to make it. So this is one of those moments when I am 90 years old, I'm gonna lie in my bed and remember the day I gave a talk in Stanford about this book, which was so I'm going to start with, it's gonna take 8 minutes or so, just in case you haven't had a chance to read the book yet. With sound effects, I'm gonna read you a part of a chapter. Hopefully that would set the mood. Rumeli Castle was right next to campus. The depth was perfect for diving, but only men swam in Istanbul. The entire coast belonged to them. Their intimidating gaze, words and actions kept women from swimming. Ironically, sometimes the same intimidation caused desperation. Women occasionally threw themselves into the water, but not for fun. On hot days, men chilled in the cool waters, and if they were too chilled, they sipped their hot tea. They lie under the sun like stray cats. Sometimes their wives waited on the shore and carried them towels. While we put on our wetsuits in the tiny, creamy bathroom of a tea garden, men played backgammon and young boys used the roof of a bus stop as a diving board. It was a balmy afternoon in September. Haha, stay out of my way. Our presence always attracted the curious and crashing gaze of passerby. I wanted to dive in and be invisible right away. Thanks for coming, Ömer. I wish we had money to take diving trips somewhere else so we wouldn't attract attention. You could go to Bodrum or Kaç with the rich kids, but you are here now and you desperately need me. We needed a guy to shield us from the gaze of other men, like nested Russian dolls. Is there enough pressure in the tanks? Girls, did you check it? Meltem, did you bring the gloves? Oops, I forgot the gloves. Our equipment is so worn out, it doesn't matter if we have the gloves or not. The crowd needed reassurance that the usual power dynamic was still there, a man in charge. Are you their instructor? Yes. He's not our instructor. He barely knows diving. You trained him 6 months ago. He's helping us. Can't you just appreciate that? He's trying to be efficient. He can be efficient and honest at the same time. Well, none of us can match your standards of honesty. You can't be honest every second of your life. When I couldn't communicate, the cynical monster in me woke up. How can you date a guy who is so full of himself? I mean, Mr. Poseidon. You don't get it. I love that song. Ladies, Allow me to check out the Cadillac, but you two stop chatting and get ready. You are getting distracted. Sure. Such a sad song. Spit! What are you doing? You don't know? Spit prevents it from getting foggy. Of course I know. My own spit works much better. Wow, I have never seen your scar this close. How did you get that? Car accident. You know, every family has their martyrs in traffic accidents. In our case, nobody died, but I acquired this scar. You were lucky. My uncle died in a car accident 2 years ago. Maybe you can get a plastic surgery for that nasty scar. I like my scar. It reminds me that I am mortal. Then why do you cover it up with your hair? A flyer interrupted our class. Vote for Pehlivan. Candidate for mayor of Istanbul. He was lucky to have this name. Pehlivan means a wrestler, a hefty and powerful man. I would never vote for someone with a comb over. We have to see him on a windy day. How did this guy become so popular so quickly? He's playing the card against the educated and elite, and he's pumping out religious propaganda. People kept asking, aren't you afraid of diving into the Bosphorus? Actually, navigating the underwater is much simpler than navigating the streets of Istanbul. A diver with a fear of heights wouldn't enjoy diving in the Bosphorus. The seabed is a cliff. I hope we see a dolphin, swordfish, but from a distance. Like bottom feeders, each time we pass the piles of trash, we peek to see if there was something valuable. Maybe a gold watch, an engagement ring, something we could take with no sense of guilt. Some of our finds were priceless. A sitting jellyfish, one mannequin leg, and fish exploring a bag from a liquor store. Earthquake? Are parts of the buildings falling into the sea? What the heck, a meteor? Meteor? Underwater, heartbeats sound loud. My ears, my skull, even the tips of my fingers were pounding. I always thought movies over-dramatize the submerged car scenes. It's descent while the headlights are on, sand settling around it quietly. Now I knew this was a completely accurate representation. Was this real? Did we have nitrogen poisoning? We were only 33 feet below the surface. Everything became quiet except the sound of our bubbles and our hearts. We were hyperventilating. The school of fish were like performers on a stage, crossing the light beams. Their calmness was in complete contrast with the situation. The light inside the car was on. If the car had been empty, this would have been the most beautiful spectacle I had ever seen. We kicked as hard as we could, but the current was keeping us from reaching the car. We can save her! She's pointing at the moon. What? Headlight? Oh, electricity. In the salty water, the battery of the car was still running. There was an electric field around the car. We were like animals, hopelessly circling around the car. If I hadn't forgotten the gloves, I could have opened that door. Who is in the car? Are they moving off loading? Should we go up, bring help? We picked up a stone, dropped it. The stone couldn't break the windshield. Archimedes' principle worked against us. Suddenly, the headlights went off. We could finally open the damn car door. So this is a part of a chapter, and now I can tell you a little bit about the totality of the and one more thing here. So when I make these projects, I make an animated video book trailer for the pieces. Let's watch that one too, and then I'm going to dive into it. It's like around 3 minutes, and it took 6 months to make it. So the story takes place at Boğaziçi University, and this is I'll talk over this video. This is, as many of you are familiar, the Boğaziçi University faculty are protesting. Boğaziçi University faculty protesting that Erdogan and AKP government is firing the faculty and bringing on their own people, sometimes with no credentials. And these non-violent protests are going on since 2021. And this situation is becoming a reality in this country too. There is an ongoing threat against universities, their fundings, and so on. So this difficulty of changing some things serves as a metaphor. The castle appears a lot in the book, at the end of the book, and throughout the book. And the university is right next to this castle. And environments in the university supplied me a perfect setup for a murder mystery. It's not that I am an expert of that genre, but the story that I was dealing with had difficult themes, while I was dealing with these difficult themes, when I established a story on a murder mystery, hopefully I created something that's page-turner. So while you are following the story, I'm kind of working on these difficult themes and perhaps brainwashing you, like on the line of murder mystery. Istanbul, half of the continent is on Asia, half of it on Europe. And every part of the city has been told in the novels, in the artworks, in literature. Is there a part that's untouched? I thought perhaps the part that's connecting the continents may be untouched. So then I thought, I really want to make a book about my bizarre years from my college time. And they are so magical, fuzzy, blurry times. And I thought this magical underwater world may help me to create that kind of world building. And the water, salty water and ocean in art and literature are used frequently as these concepts and metaphors, as it may resonate with you. And for me, water was extension of my characters. And the depth of water resemble the troubles that they are going to face. And the water offered them a sense of weightlessness, freeing them from the authoritarian government, pressures of patriarchy, economic strife, and perhaps like the difficulties of being young. Beneath the surface, there are secrets. And like their young minds, water is unpredictable, with currents mirroring sudden thoughts and flow of life. And trauma can taint the human psyche. So the characters witness a freak accident while underwater, and they get traumatized. Throughout the book, they try to get rid of their trauma, but then they dived into the trauma of Turkish politics. But overall, how I was going to tell a story that's underwater in the Bosphorus, you should tell things that you know, right? I'm not a scuba diver and I haven't been there. So I had many friends who were divers. I heard stories about that. And I also interviewed a military scuba diver, and he shared his work anecdotes with me, which helped me again my world building. Boğaziçi University is a separate bubble than the reality of Turkey. The patriarchy exists there a little bit less, that pressure, but as soon as you step out of the campus, like literally, just you come out of the door, and then you reach to the Bosphorus, and there it's only men swimming in the cold waters of the Bosphorus. And these are like very common images when you walk the shore. So in this campus setting, next to castle, right next to this ocean, there's patriarchy outside, but kind of less inside. This is the first dorm I stayed, and this is built by Turkish people. And after you suffered enough, you can collect credits and move to a better dorm, which is this one. And that one is built by Americans, Robert College, former Robert College. But both of them are managed by Turks, so both of them were miserable inside. And this is a quite key frame for this book, like it's kind of entire story is emerging from here. So 250 square foot room, 8 women, right? 4 bunk beds, metal closets. For like 4 to 6 years, we are in a setup like that. Imagine the amount of drama, constant drama happening in this room, like constant heartbreak, people breaking up with their boyfriends, they are falling in love, they are getting bad grades, somebody's fighting with somebody. So in the world of these chaotic environment, I wanted to tell the stories that, but you cannot make a book just based on your dormitory anecdotes. So what I did was I connected the misery, that like smelly dorm rooms and that entire room, the misery in that room, to the misery of the country. So this room served as a microcosm of the larger Turkish politics, which is a different kind of misery. These are some of my roommates from that time, and they inspired my characters. It's not like one person is one person. I took their bits and pieces and combined them with fictional elements, so I created my characters. And as my characters dive underwater, they also go to underground to Basilica Cistern in Istanbul. And many of you know there are two Medusa heads at the Basilica Cistern, sideways and upside down, submerged into water, and there are coins scattered around them. And tourists throw these coins, and there is a wish attached to each coin, right? While I was making this book, I had a wish too. I wanted to sell the book to a known good publisher, like my first book. So I did my job, I created my proposal, I did my sample chapters, I had a good agent, we pitched the book, nobody wanted it, we failed, right? I did my crying, I put this dead project on the shelf, I got depressed, it was over, I forgot about it. And then this call came. Rarely they give money to graphic novelists. They were giving a good chunk of money, a grant, along with an established cartoonist whom I really like, Ulvi Last, is going to be your mentor. But 600 people applied for it, and they asked for an autobiographical graphic novel. As you know, My Evil I See is not autobiographical, it's semi-autobiographical. But I wanted to work with her, so quickly I created a project. 22 years ago I came to the United States, my English wasn't fluent, and my first job was teaching public speaking. So that's my first year in the United States. I submitted, and then they said, Uli wants to meet with you. We met on Zoom, and Uli said, I read your proposal. It's a bad proposal. I don't like it, she said. But she read the entire thing. At the very end, I put a link for Evil I See. She clicked the link, she went into Evil I See, and she read my sample Evil I See pages. So she said, I love that project. If you do that, I'll be your mentor. So that I and these two other comics artists, during the pandemic time, we met with Uli on Zoom. So at that time, I kind of re-established the story and start working on it. With the grant, I went to France, Angoulême, and then I also went to Berlin Forecast Festival. Book is not out yet. I don't have a publisher at this point. I'm just like still shaping the story and so on. In Germany, in their radial system building, which is aligned with the river, I created the Basilica Cistern environment with printed pages from the book and videos and images from the Basilica Cistern with a soundscape. And that also allowed me to think the project in a spatial way. So here, the car plummeting was actually my project plummeting. Project was dead until a point. I didn't believe in myself, I didn't believe in the project, until someone I respected believed in the project. So the gift that Uli gave me, sometimes we give that gift to our students, sometimes we give it to our loved ones. They stop believing, and we believe in what they are doing, and something beautiful emerges. You will see like how that belief unfolded as I present more. My background is a mixed basket, but as you see, there are no arts in it. My mathematics background and my digital media PhD, that allows me to approach to media in a fearless way, that I use anything in the world as a material for art making. And I have wild methods for making comics because, like many of you, I'm not trained, I don't know how to do it. So I have to invent it. This project, again, I'll go over. So, Ordinary Things was my online comics journal. I started when I came to the United States. Instead of sending emails to my friends, I was making one comic, whatever stayed in my mind, and sharing it online. There are 1,800 images on that site. And while I was making that project, I started combining my drawings with collage, with unexpected materials, creating my own aesthetic. This is a website we designed for those images that allows you to navigate the images based on their colors, materials, themes, locations, etc. But this project served me as my laboratory to create the aesthetic that I have been using for my first graphic novel. So instead of like drawing the heads of my family members, I used buttons there. And that served me well, and it worked for Dare to Disappoint. But when I was working with Uli, she said, she's German, so she said, you're being lazy. Like, to avoid just drawing the backgrounds on people, you are using collage. You know, backgrounds are so important. They set up the environment, they orient the reader. You have to draw the background. So that I approached it differently for Evil I See, and I used the collage in more subtle ways in the second book. Since I am not trained for drawing backgrounds or drawing complicated things, I rely on photographs. So that's my hand, right? I take a photo, so I put hair and a cigarette and it becomes a man's hand. Here I'm holding a tampon, and then the police officer holding the tampon, and he's saying, what is this? Looks like a bullet, but pink and light. So this dormitory background appears a lot, and I have to satisfy Uli, she wants the backgrounds. I 3D model the environments, and that way, for a complicated background like that, that serves me as a reference point, and then I can move the camera wherever I want, so that I don't frantically search Google to find reference images. Help me to draw that. Sometimes my image search thing goes to an extreme. This is Turkish Airlines flight attendant costume from mid-90s. I found that on eBay, and I had to dress my character that way. Or I needed to draw a visa page from mid-90s, but I didn't know how it looked. So internet is an amazing place. You can even find a stamp from 93. Visa pages look like that. My digital devices are full of ridiculous images, me posing in different ways, so that becomes a diver. There, like we are reading AARP bulletin, and we are not only posing, we are also acting and believing in our mission, and then it becomes the divers here. They are reading a humor magazine. I'm defying gravity here, becomes the divers. Sometimes there's no one around. I act all the characters, I do a photo collage, and then I use it as a reference to create the images. So it keeps going on, and like that's it doesn't show on it, but that's my feet over there that I'm trying to shoot the scene from the top. And here it is. If I have the form, then I can do it. So the phone is full of these images, and after the project is done, it's quite entertaining to see these images. This is a 280 pages book. It takes a lot of time, a lot of physical therapy, different parts of your body. And once it's done, you're like, it's done now, I'm gonna start celebrating this. And maybe one day I'll come to Stanford and give a talk. You think about that, and the publisher says, what are we doing for the cover? And your pain starts again. So that we tried different ideas for the cover, and then we settled on something like that, and that became our cover. On the cover, there is a rock like that. Again, like as an example of my wild methods, I use coffee grounds to create the rock. And the hills here are made of cinnamon. Right? And then I don't like flat Photoshop colors. What's that?
Jam?
Very close. Very, very close. Blueberries, yes. So it's like a food catalog at the same time. You eat a lot of chocolates while making a book like that. Chocolate wrapping paper becomes a background. Like whenever Uli wanted me to draw complicated backgrounds, but whenever I have opportunity, I put my collage there. And you take walks during times of frustration, and all these treasures I found on the streets found their place in the book. This is Fidelity Bank envelope, became the tablecloth. Blue tape became the 4 seas surrounding Turkey. Evil Eye beads, this time they were the heads of my roommates to whom I dedicated the book. And there are days the home turns into an ocean. I paint pages and pages of white, pages to blue with acrylic, and then I scan them, and I have many folders with these images. So if I'm doing a page layout underwater, they are going to go down, depth is important, then I use a texture like that. You combining analog and digital, I create a page like that. When we make graphic novels, even though it's a super lonely process, we still have to agree with the editor, publisher, and in my case, Uli too. So I made, like anyone does that, we make thumbnails. Entire book is drawn with quick images, and text is locked, so you know how many images on one page. So if I'm gonna draw this image from the thumbnails, then first I draw the characters, and then I ink everything. I draw the background, I'm inking on the computer, and then I color it on the computer for Evil Eye C. And for that one, bottom one, they are going to the tea garden. I draw the characters separately so I can place them wherever I want. That's when it is colored. The reason I'm telling all of this, if you don't have to draw in order to make graphic novels. If you have the persistence, then there are methods to create that totality. Here are my roommates in their mid-40s, enjoying bits of themselves in fictionalized form. And Dare to Disappoint was the story of figuring out what we want from ourselves against the expectations of family, society, teachers, and like economic troubles and so on. Among those pressures, how do we figure out what are we going to do this precious life? Since it's a universal theme, it resonated with many cultures and it got translated into many languages. And I didn't know what kind of journey Evil Eye C would have. And thanks to Uli, bringing this project back to life again. And thanks to many people who helped me to make this project a reality, it's accomplishing some milestones and having its own journey. Hopefully in fall we're gonna have its translations. And so both books, when I look at them, the common thing about them is obviously salty water, which is my big love as a person who grew up next to Aegean Sea. But it's also about a country that I love, but I left 22 years ago, but I didn't stop loving. So perhaps it's those lovers who abandon us, or we abandon them, but we never stop loving them. They make us write books about them. Thank you.
This is wonderful. Thank you. Very inspiring. And I'm curious about your 1990s. I've been thinking about 1990s recently again, which is a formative year for myself. We are more or less the same age, and I don't know whether I liked it or didn't like it, discuss it, or kind of I couldn't decide my feelings about 1990s.
I was so afraid you were gonna say about the book, like.
Yeah. So how you, yeah, I mean, can you talk about 1990s and the book?
It's somewhat 90s, but it's somewhat what happened after 90s.
Yeah.
So I kind of wrote the 90s with the knowledge of
What happened later?
What happened later, because it's a crucial year for us to, not in 1995, but before then, current government starts coming into power. And so with that knowledge, I looked at it. Also, when I create a book like that, I write all the anecdotes I want to play with. Not everything makes into the book, but I want to play with the Susurluk scandal, in which there was a car accident, and in the car there was mafia and the police and government all together, and there were guns in the trunk, so deep state situation became obvious. So I wanted to bring that into the story. For example, it came in a form of car, but I also wanted to do my story about the water. So whatever I can bring from those years came into it. The Kurdish issue, an essential, a different level of the battle between the Turkish state and Kurdish folks. It comes as a theme to the book. Yeah, so there are
Headscarf issue, I think, is.
This headscarf issue is there. But again, it's so tricky. Like, there are those issues. I cannot pack everything there. I can bring only I can really relate to the plot I'm dealing with. The Kurdish issue comes in a very, I don't want to spoil it right now, but there's someone in prison. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much. I just want to give you a little bit of background because we are here as a family. I was teaching graphic novels in the Middle East class years ago, and my daughter was about 4 years old, and she started liking graphic novels with You're There to Disappoint. So it was like a great experience for us as a family because I also grew up in Izmir. I went to Boğaziçi. I stayed in the dorms that you talk about. So there's a lot of. We all did, yeah. And so it's just like there's a lot of resonance here. But I have two questions. One is about the way that we remember Boğaziçi campus in the 1990s. So I want to hear a little bit more about. Like in hindsight, because like when I was at Boğaziçi, I experienced it as a great place, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, differences live together. But at the same time, I also was thinking there's a lot of room for expression like, yes, Kurds are there are groups that express Kurdish rights, but they were very much isolated from one another. So is it like the way that you see Boğaziçi campus, does it involve a certain degree of romanticization, or were you able to see those fault lines at the time as well? And my second question is about the translation of your book into Turkish, because I noticed that the title is Bırak Üzülsünler. I know that like there's a lot of considerations that go into titles, but Bırakın Üzülsünler, like let them be upset, maybe roughly translating. There's translators in the room, so I'm being careful. But dare to disappoint, disappointment and being upset are different emotional registers. How did you translate the cultural context from the American to Turkish?
Actually two questions are connected to each other. When I create a graphic novel, I don't have enough space or a similar approach similar to a humanities scholar who kind of can describe that environment with all its detail. As I said, like I can bring in whatever fits to characters, whatever fits to plot. So in a more limited way. So my characters are not necessarily political characters. They are just kind of sort of apolitical in a way, but even you are apolitical, they are pulled into a political situation. So I think those divisions were definitely there. There were so separate groups, and I even at the time I wasn't aware of when I was at the college, I wasn't aware of the depth of the Kurdish problem. Like it was something tangential to me. But then later on, we figured out, many of us. So that I could describe. And I wasn't a superbly political character when I was in college. That is a part of me is in those characters too. And in the translation question, I did that title because sometimes one-to-one translation is not possible. Like to me, a book title is something that will stay with people. So I gave up on the idea of I should do a one-to-one translation, and I took the liberty because it's my own work, like that. Because Dare to Disappoint, if I hayal kırıklığına uğratmaya cesaret et, it sounded that way. I couldn't find a better way. Do you have a better way?
It's not that I don't like it. I was just thinking what kind of consideration you had in mind in terms of
that was the consideration. Yeah.
No, it's a great title.
I don't know that it's actually. I mean, it's at the core. Dare to disappoint, you let them to be said and deal with that heavy load. There it connected for me, yeah.
Because I think it's culturally very apt. When I think of an American context, it's more about disappointing your parents. But for a lot of us who grew up in the Turkish context, we don't want to make them sad. We don't want them to be upset.
Right.
That type of an emotion, I think, comes with it.
Right. Though disappointment and making them sad are so connected to each other too. Yes.
Yeah, sort of connected to the first thing that I mentioned. I was wondering, when you're writing this book, how much are you thinking about the audience being young adults specifically? Because I saw the second book won a prize for like adult graphic novel. How much is that changing how you're writing? Whether you have maybe a pressure from publishers to appeal to young adults, and how that changes the book? Would Dare to Disappoint be different if it didn't have this expectation?
Yeah.
And also, what graphic novels are you being influenced by? Like, who are you seeing that you're trying to model after? Uli, obviously, but who else?
The first book, Dare to Disappoint, was kind of designed for by the publisher, not by me, 14 and up. It came out 10 years ago, and I mostly engaged with adults, and mostly adults gave it to their children and said, read this is what I went through, so that they were Or like the international, like the Turkish American couples gave it to their partners and said, read, it wasn't like, mine wasn't easy like yours. And so it's in a way our user's manual, right? I don't know, I'm sure it 14 and up thing worked. The second book, I really purposefully wanted to make a book for adults, and even though like my agent tried to pitch it as a young adult book, the young adult writers, publishers said, no, there's sex scandal in it, we don't want it. So they have like, there are certain formulas out there. I'm sure some people are able to navigate or break those boundaries, but I purposefully designed this one as a young adult one. And I really enjoyed making a young adult book. Young adult part is so hard, and I have so much respect to folks who are doing that well. The difficulty of doing young adult is you have to explain so many things to make it understandable, but explaining so many things without making the story didactic is the difficulty. When I first did Dare to Disappoint, the first draft came completely read. I was thinking I'm done, but I did 6 more after that. She said, who is Atatürk? What did he do? Why there are like private schools and public schools? What happens like if you stay at the public school until the end? What happens if you don't go to university? What's a weekend school? I was like, how am I going to explain all of these and then tell my story? Yeah. Yes.
Hi. So I grew up, actually I read Dare to Disappoint in Burcu and Aisha's class last year. So yay. I'm 23, my parents are your age. They've been here for 25 years, so it's very similar from Turkey. And I really enjoyed Dare to Disappoint because it gave me a window into their life and how they grew up in ways that I was like, oh wait, all this makes sense now. And actually my boyfriend just read it also in their class. And I was like, oh, it makes sense now. And I was like, oh, okay. What I really enjoyed was kind of the autobiographical, but also some like, I don't know if they call it like imaginary realism, just like straying from reality a little bit in the way.
Dare to Disappoint.
Yes, but it seems like you did it more in Evil I See. So I'm wondering how you conceptualize, like, you know, you're starting from your life, but then making it more fictional. I guess, how do you think about that kind of balance between like real and fiction?
Thank you. That was something I hoped to talk, but I forgot to bring it up. When I was making the autobiographical Dare to Disappoint, I am like seeing, oh my god, like this story could be that way, it could be that way, but I am a very like obsessed person. So there is I was like, I have to tell the story as it happened. Like I can't add, subtract anything. The way I remember. The memory goes in the weird ways. Not that I remember everything correctly, but I wanted to be loyal to my own memory. That was so stressful and limiting. And I said to myself, I really want to do a fiction book so I can go in all directions. Though I am like in a transitional place, the main character still looks like me, even though named differently. And it's not me, it's my alter ego, perhaps, right? I'm never that brave. Maybe in the third book, I'm going to be completely in the land of fiction. Or back to autobiography. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is all very inspirational. My question is about you being also an academic, right? Obviously, you had to balance your passion in drawing or sketching, and the trials and tribulations of the job market in academia or getting a tenure, etc., etc. So, how did you integrate your drawing routine, if I may say so, into your professional life?
Yeah, I got lucky. So I am at Northwestern Radio TV Film Department, but I'm a production faculty. So that they get really happy when I do a graphic novel, when I get reviews on New York Times, The Guardian, like all those say bravo, keep doing that. That way, like if I would be writing on the writing side of the things, it wouldn't count. So it goes into artistic production. That I didn't plan, it was flow of life, and at the moment, like what I can do, thinking parts came well together for me. Maybe the hard part of making this type of work is if you look at most graphic novel lists, they are working in universities. Like there are many examples of it. So you have to do 2 full-time jobs. This is kind of a very crazy medium, takes years to make it. In a way, it feels like working in 2 jobs. You have to have something broken here to get into these kind of things. But yeah, that's how it goes. Thank you.
Yes, hello. So most of the graphic novels from the Middle East, they merge the personal with the political, right? So, and Dare to Disappoint was a perfect example of this, like what a nation state are trying to create as a nation state on the state level and then on the individual level, the students in the education system trying to make everyone homogeneous. And we see that you again mix political with the personal. Is there a pressure from the publishers when you write about the Middle East, there has to be some political, because like we read graphic novels by American artists, right? They could be completely devoid of any political agenda, but anything that we read from the Middle East comes with the political, the grand narrative kind of.
You're so right. I think there is not a pressure from the publisher, but for me, maybe that's not maybe an American or a European cartoonist would approach it differently. When I looked at my material, I said I cannot just make a book about those college year anecdotes. Like, it's not important enough. It feels that way to me. And then I always think that microcosm, micro and microcosm thing, because whatever was happening in the 90s Turkey was happening in that little room too. But I am also, like my third book, I really would love to make a book that doesn't take place in Turkey and just tell something very slowly. I would love to try to tell something that's not necessarily political. So it's quite possible. But I mean, it's the same instinct that when we get into an Uber or taxi in Turkey, we start talking politics with the driver.
We can't help.
You can't help, yes.
Kind of related to that political question, can you talk about the kind of echoes that you're seeing here versus the 90s? I mean, for me, when I was reading, I was thinking, oh, we have a politician that has a comb over. I mean, it just, everything seems like almost too on point. Like
Who has a comb over?
Trump. Like, you put him in the wind, it's the same thing. Have you seen these pictures of some golf course in Scotland and the wind comes up? But I wondered if there's like, for me, it's sort of like, oh my God, this is America. Turkey in the 90s is America today. And so, can you talk about that? I mean, I know you're working over years and years, but it seems very relevant to the moment.
Yeah, so since the book took so many long years to make it, while I was working on the book, the Trump's sex scandals were coming along, right? Those were kind of inspiration points for me. And not only like it's 90s Turkey spanning to today, but it is also a little bit of living in this country and being exposed to what's happening, that all of it is kind of came into it. And in a way, it feels like we had this horrible disease that is lasting for 22 years. And as a person who knows that, I'm coming and telling the American folks, saying what the root of it is coming from that. And so with Turkish comic magazines, they were very male-oriented. It was very hard to make a dent as a woman. Like they would say, how about you draw about menstruation? Like, but I don't want to. But you were kind of pushed towards that feminist topics, or they would put all the women on one page. Biz bıyıksızlar, the ones who doesn't have mustache. And then like there was still a male humor, woman humor kind of separation. And there was also more inclination for single frame storytelling. If it was long form, rarely it was autobiographical. There wasn't an example of it at the time. So yes and no, yeah. Yes.
For Dare to Disappoint, in my mind it was a sort of a comparison to the Arab of the Future series from Riyad Sattouf. So, and also the age is similar for like the first half of the series. So I was wondering how the change from a child's point of view to a college student point of view like shaped your writing as well. Like when you're like from a child's point of view, you can like say fewer things and like have the people infer more. But I guess are you more forthright in the new book with like what you want the characters to say because they know more?
Like the maybe using the language in an artful way is not my strong suit. I am very direct as a child or an adult. The way that I use the language, there's a table, there's a glass, somebody at the door. It's like very simple language in both cases, except like a couple different places. Maybe, though the narrator in Dare to Disappoint is not necessarily a child. Like the narrator is speaking with the knowledge of today, but maybe how the characters speaking could be that way. I'm thinking through by talking. I don't think there is a huge difference for me, that I still have the child me in me, so I can't speak like that, and adult me is here, so I should think more about that actually, yeah. Yeah. Cool. Is it a good place to, go ahead.
No, I mean,
Okay.
you go ahead.
No, I was gonna end it. Shall I?
Okay, maybe I can ask you. Because you said water is at the center of your thinking, and the illustrations, really, the blue shows it. I haven't read the second book yet, but when you were talking about that diving in the Bosphorus, I was thinking about Orhan Pamuk's when
When the water was withdrawn.
and I was gonna ask you, like the water theme, like what type of literary inspirations you have got, like what type of experiences. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Oh, that scene was very formative,
Yeah.
totally. So that when I thought of like when I thought underwater would be a perfect place to set this story, and then it came to me that I remember like I read that part so many times. I went back and I reread that part. That is part of my thinking totally, like that. And I paid attention not to kind of use anything from his world. Reading it was helpful too, but it's something that helped me to imagine there is a life going on there too. Yeah.
Mysterious.
Yes, because the sea life in Marmara Sea is not that lively. Actually, divers say that there's not too much going on there, except it gets deep so quickly and it gets cold as you go down, and then there's a depth that you cannot dive with regular equipment. Yeah.